Hello, my name is Pevin Dolk, also known as the smartest fantasy analyst in the entire world. And I would like to introduce you all to the brand new League Media.
Real quick, I never made a logo. It'll come soon.
Where I will be covering all the news from your favorite fantasy league. This includes draft grades, trade grades, waiver wire pickups, weekly recaps, interviews with all the different owners around the league, and the much anticipated weekly power rankings. Today, we'll be talking about our most recent draft. Every team will get an F or an A+ depending on how your draft went. And we'll get your first ever power ranking for week 1. I would also like to explain that these power rankings do change by week to week, so if you're ranked number 1, don't get too excited as you could fall to number 10 by the time the end of the season comes around. So let's get started, shall we? I'm going to start by the 10th overall pick and work my way down to the number 1 overall pick, mostly because I have some things to say for the best to last. With the last pick in the league fantasy draft, we have Trey. With big marquee guys being taken in the first round, it's hard to decide who you want your 2 back-to-back cornerstone pieces will be. I think Garrett Wilson and Saquon Barkley, however, are 2 pretty good options. Huge upside to both players if things work out, but also really awful floors to drop on if things don't. We also see Trey take the first tight end in the draft of Sam Laporta, which I think is an extremely important pick for him as he more than likely does not fall back to him on his next turnaround. Laporta will be winning a lot of games with Trey this year if he performs as well as he did last year. His next pick would then be Joe Mixon, as I believe is a solid pick, as long as he stays healthy and is used as often as he was used with Cincinnati. I believe though that his round 5 and round 6 picks were his most important and best picks in his respective draft, as he would select Lamar Jackson and T. Higgins. Lamar could very well win another MVP this season, as he has stated in interviews this year that he has lost weight and is planning on using his feet a lot more. T. Higgins also has tremendous upside in the fact that if Burrow can stay healthy and Jamar decides to hold out, Higgins will absolutely be fed. The next few picks are some more wide receivers such as Christian Watson, who if again stays healthy could be another great sleeper pick, and Godwin, who has a wide receiver 2 for a team that loves to chuck the ball, could also be a great flex option for him. He doesn't end up taking another running back, however, until round 10, where he selects Jaylen Warren. I think Warren is okay. He and Najee both split time last year and is more than likely going to continue this going into this year. So I think he is more of a risk than anything. And considering there were still RB1 options left on the board, I think that this pick could have gone elsewhere. Maybe a power move to try and give him away to Zach for some upcoming trades. Going forward, Marquise Brown and Nick Chubb were selected, and both were risky picks, but if they can perform like they once were able to, I think selecting them in the 11th and 12th round can be very solid. Would like to make note, I don't need to make note that he picked fucking Brandon Aubrey. Bye weeks for Trey that he could struggle with are week 5, where he will be out of his tight end and running back 1, and week 12, where he is left without his wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Based on what I see in this draft, I'm giving Trey a solid B-. These players can very well go one way or another. I believe that these are built by trust in these players, that they can perform well, but matched up with some other teams around the league, I think he might be weaker than most. However, he's got a great quarterback, a great wide receiver 1, and a great running back 1. Again, considering where he was drafting from, I think he still did okay. ESPN ranks Trey as the 3rd best team in the league. However, on my ranking, he's going to be ranked 7th on my week 1 power ranking. With the 9th pick in the draft, we have one-time Mickey Mouse ring champion, Gavin. His approach to the draft was simple. Running backs first, wide receivers later. His first 2 picks would end up being Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. I think grabbing running backs early was a good choice, as most running backs in this draft fall really hard after the 2nd round. However, I am just not a huge fan of the choices made here. Jonathan Taylor has been extremely boom or bust the last couple of years, whether he's hurt or just not performing as well as his 2022 season. I think this pick is really risky and could very well be a bust situation. I think Gibbs is okay as well, but with Montgomery being used in the red zone as much as he was last year, there's some big concern there. However, I think Gibbs will do a great job getting up the field and is the only way I see him grabbing most of his touchdowns. His next 2 picks would then be wide receivers with Drake London and DJ Moore. I like these 2 picks a lot. Drake London with the new head coach and an offensive coordinator can very well turn his career around, where he is the clear wide receiver 1 and will be used very heavily in this new offense. And with Kirk Cousins getting the ball to him, it should be no problem. DJ Moore as well is one of my favorite wide receivers going into this year's draft. We all saw what he could do last year with some unimpressive quarterbacks, and I think now that with Caleb Williams, he's going to explode. His round 5 pick has been voted by an owner around the league as one of the best steals in the entire draft in Cooper Kupp. which I also think is a great pickup in the 5th, especially as a flex option going forward. If he can stay healthy and Stafford finds him down the field and returns as the Triple Crown player we once saw, this will be an electric pick. George Pickens was selected next, who I also believe is another great pick. As a clear wide receiver 1, I believe that he could very well find himself in the starting lineup in weeks to come. The only worry is that he has not had very strong quarterback success, which has been depleting his draft stock, but I believe that with a veteran quarterback like Russell Wilson, he will be seeing a lot of targets moving forward. I believe Pickens will also be great trade bait as well. We then see Mark Andrews and Tyjae Spears selected. I think Mark Andrews is solid and will more than likely be a top 7 tight end by the end of the year if only he stays healthy, and Isaiah likely doesn't take over for that tight end 1 role. Risky, but I think is okay with what the other tight end choices were in the draft. Tyjae Spears is a running back that I did not like at all in this spot. He never really broke out last year and now will be sharing snaps with Tony Pollard, who just got paid by the Titans. I think Spears being drafted as a running back 3 for this team, with other clear running back 1s still left on the board, was a very poor choice. I would say that this is also probably his worst pick in the draft. Let's see Dak Prescott and Raheem Mostert get selected. Dak can be great, a very explosive quarterback who can toss 5 touchdowns a game, but that is more than likely his only upside. I think that as a round 9 pick though is not that bad. And Mostert Mania can be solid if his other predecessor in Achane can't stay healthy. I assume again he's more of a trade piece than anything, as he will more than likely remain on his bench otherwise. His next few picks are okay, but nothing too exciting. The only real sleeper I could find is maybe Tyler Lockett, but I'm sure he'll be waived by week 5. A key bye week for Gavin will be week 14, where he will be without his tight end and running back 1 in Jonathan Taylor. But other than that, the rest of his bye weeks look solid and should be okay down the stretch. Based on what I see, I'm giving this draft a solid B. If his running backs can stay healthy and can perform well, then he's got a great looking team moving forward. His wide receiver core is extremely solid and can win games with just that alone. ESPN ranks Gavin's team 4th in the league. However, on my ranking, he ends up at rank 5 on my week 1 power ranking. And maybe, just maybe, this team will bring him his first real ring. With the 8th pick in the draft, and next up on our list, we have 6-time champion and commissioner, Zach. His first 2 picks were Amon-Ra St. Brown and A.J. Brown. I think that Amon-Ra falling to the 8th spot was insane, and I think it is the best wide receiver outside of Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb going into this year's draft, and in my opinion, one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. A.J. Brown being selected next was a bit of a surprise given the fact that he had not picked up a running back, but A.J. Brown, as we've seen, can dominate and can absolutely carry fantasy teams on his own. His next 2 picks are some that I also love as well, as he was able to find Rachaad White and Josh Jacobs. Rachaad White proved last year that he plays a key role in the Bucs offense and will not only find a lot of touches this year, but a lot of targets as well. And prior to contrary belief, I think that Josh Jacobs in the 4th round is an absolute steal. With the new offense and a way better offensive line, I think that Josh Jacobs will play a vital role and will lead the Packers to success. If he stays healthy, of course. Round 5, we see Zach pick Zay Flowers, which again, absolutely love this pick. Zay Flowers is an explosive receiver on a very fast offense, which will see him getting the ball thrown to him a lot. I think that this is one of the better picks in the draft, and in my opinion, the best first 5 picks in the entire draft for any team. Following round 5, he selects Ramondre Stevenson, who we all saw last year fall off a bit of a cliff, but the Patriots' struggles as a team, and especially as an offense, played a huge factor in why his production went down. I think that with a new young quarterback and some solid receiver options, I think Stevenson can pick up where he first started and can possibly be a good flex option going down the line. In the 7th round, we also see Scary Terry selected, and again, it's a solid pick this late in the draft. Clear wide receiver 1 with a new quarterback who, if again can get the ball thrown to, will be a great receiver moving forward. I think this is one of Zach's best trade pieces. We get to one of his first stinkers in the draft with Najee Harris picked in the 8th round, and I think, honestly, in the 8th, it's not terrible, but I fucking hate Najee Harris, but I still don't think he is who we once thought he would be, and him splitting time with Warren isn't promising. Zach will try and trade this guy every single week and will fail every single time. Have fun with him sitting on your bench. In the 9th round, he ends up taking Keon Coleman, which I think is another solid pickup. Competition for wide receiver 1 is at stake in Buffalo, and with Keon being a high draft pick, he could very well end up seeing a lot of targets from a quarterback who is in the MVP hunt. Jake Ferguson is his next pick in the 10th round, and again, another solid pickup this late in the draft. Ferguson can be very hot and cold, however, if he stays consistent enough, he'll easily find himself top 5 in tight ends this year. His next 3 picks are basically just handcuffs. The only highlight I see is Rico Dowdle, who again I think could easily take over Ezekiel Elliott, so that could be one of his key picks. Last thing I'll mention is that he didn't end up taking a quarterback until round 15 with Justin Herbert, which honestly is not that bad at all. Obviously, his downside is that his receiver options are pretty bleak and is now under a new offensive scheme with Jim Harbaugh, as he will most likely be handing off the ball a lot. However, with Herbert's strong legs and speed, we could see some new quarterback run plays drawn up from the Chargers. A key bye week for Zach include Week 5, where he will be without A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra, and Justin Herbert. Look to take advantage where he is left without his top 2 receivers. Based on what I see in this draft, I'm giving Zach an A+. I believe that not wasting a pick early on a quarterback was honestly smart and saw every opportunity to take the most talented and promising skill position left. I believe that anyone on his bench can be huge trade assets moving forward, and I'm not excited to see OJ didn't do it come playoff time. ESPN ranks Zach's team last in the league. However, in my ranking, he lands at the top of the board at number 1 on my Week 1 power ranking. With the 7th overall pick in the draft, we have none other than Rammer up next. I have one word to describe this draft: risk. With his first 2 picks, he selects Justin Jefferson and Kyren Williams. No hate to either of these players, because their upside is obviously extremely high. But for Jefferson, this is going to be his first full year with a quarterback not named Kirk Cousins, and Sam Darnold is nowhere near an even decent replacement. I understand that Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, but with Amon-Ra staring at you on the draft board, with a quarterback who we all know works very well with, Jefferson was just not the right choice here. Kyren Williams is a running back who has very clearly shown what he is capable of, but he has to stay healthy. However, his 2023 was indeed very promising when he was on the field and had a great stretch of dominance in the last few weeks. If he can keep up the production, he's not the worst running back chosen here. His next 2 picks are DK Metcalf and Alvin Kamara. Again, in order for these guys to be successful, they have to stay healthy. I really don't like the DK pick here, as in 2023 he clearly regressed pretty significantly, as he only had 2 games with more than 20 points in the 16 games he played. If he can once remain as the dominant and strong wide receiver that we've seen in the past, then this is a great pick, but I still think you had better, more deserving options in this spot. Obviously, Alvin Kamara had to go at some point, and he obviously carries a huge upside, but I only find that upside with his ability to catch the ball. His rushing stats last year were not great, as he was only averaging 53 rushing yards a game. However, he gets the ball thrown to him so much, so if he can see as many targets as he did last year, he should be fine. I still think that there were other better options though at this point. His next 2 picks include Malik Nabers and Calvin Ridley. Again, I don't necessarily love these picks. Malik Nabers is obviously an explosive athlete with very high wide receiver 1 upside, but his quarterback is by far one of the worst in the league. In order for him to be good, he just simply has to get the ball thrown to him, which looks very unpromising. Calvin Ridley as well is also a solid player, but with DeAndre Hopkins lining up with him and a quarterback who puts fucking mayo in his coffee, I still think that this is too big of a risk to take early on. His next 2 picks, again, I think are just pretty risky: Anthony Richardson and Deontay Johnson. AR, when he was healthy, very clearly proved that he was a beast and a future franchise quarterback for the Colts. Not saying he isn't right now, because he very clearly is. But again, I just think that this is more of a risk than it is solid. He only played 4 games. You don't really know how he's going to play. Especially a young quarterback coming back from injury, I expect a pretty slow start from him. Deontay Johnson is a player that I do like, and we also what Adam Thielen was doing by himself with Bryce Young. And now that I believe Bryce Young has a couple more options to throw to, I believe he'll be able to spread the offense out and become the quarterback who we want him to be. But this isn't about Bryce Young, this is about Deontay Johnson. And I think he's fine here, but I assume he will be someone you were trying to trade every week, or someone you start once your lineup isn't producing as you thought it would. Sorry. Next 2 picks by Rammer are Ezekiel Elliott and Blake Corum. And honestly, Blake Corum pick is absolutely fine here. I think he's pretty good. A lot of people have a lot of high expectations for him, and I think as a handcuff, that's very solid. Ezekiel Elliott, however, don't think he's going to be anything this year. And I understand he's going to sit on your bench for most of the year. However, I just don't see the upside. I think Rico Dowdle is more promising, and we've seen what Ezekiel Elliott has done the last however many years. Again, don't think there's a lot of upside here, and believe that this is another waste of a draft pick. You take Gus Edwards next. It's a fine pick. He'll sit on your bench. I think that with Jim Harbaugh's new offense, I think Gus Edwards could be good, so I think this pick is actually not that bad. And then you also pick Brock Bowers next, which I actually really love this pick, especially in the 12th round. A rookie tight end for a quarterback who isn't necessarily the best, I think is going to be used way more often than people think, and I think Brock Bowers is a great pick. A key bye week for Rammer is week 6, where he will be without Kyron Williams and Justin Jefferson, but other than that, his bye weeks will look okay. Based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving Rammer a D. I wouldn't say it's bad enough to deserve an F because there is tremendous upside here, but I just believe a team full of risk will fall apart faster than you can see. I unfortunately don't see a lot of promise here. ESPN ranks this team at number 8, and there was one vote around the league that saw Rammer having the best team. It's probably you, Rammer, who voted that. However, on my ranking, he will be placed 9th on my week 1 power ranking. With the 6th overall pick in the draft, we have none other than Nick up next. His first 2 picks would be Ja'Marr Chase and Travis Etienne. I have extremely mixed feelings about Ja'Marr Chase. To this day, we still have not heard whether or not he's going to play this year. And obviously, when he's playing, he is easily a top 3 wide receiver in the league. However, the fact that he might not even play this year, and again, being taken before Amon-Ra St. Brown, in my opinion, is just really foolish. Travis Etienne is someone that I think that you can easily rely on this year and was one of my favorite running backs going into this year's draft. He's a little inconsistent, which is a big concern, but I think he's also a running back that plays a huge role in this offense. His next 2 picks would be Davante Adams and Kenneth Walker. And I don't mind these 2 picks. And in my opinion, I think that Gardner Minshew is an extremely underrated quarterback and will try to find Davante Adams as often and as much as he possibly can. I think personally Davante Adams in the 3rd is a steal. Kenneth Walker, however, concerns me a little bit. However, with the other running backs still left on the board, I think this pick was an absolute must, as by the time it would have been back to his pick, he would have seen no other RB2s left. His next 2 picks would then be Brandon Ayuk and Tank Dell. And in my opinion, I think Ayuk is a huge steal in the 5th. Whether he's playing in San Francisco or playing with any other team, I think that he's an absolute superstar and is going to succeed no matter where he goes. Tank Dell, however, is someone who concerns me. With other talented wide receivers that he lines up with on this team, and his risk of injury, is someone that you really want to pay close attention to moving forward. His next 2 picks would then be CJ Stroud and Evan Ingram. I think CJ is great here. Because of his dominant rookie year and his new offensive weapons, he's going to be way better than who he was last year. And even then, he was still quarterback 9 and delivered impressive performances, being consistent throughout the year. And Evan Ingram, in my opinion, is just Evan Ingram. I think that this late in the draft, he's always going to be a top 10 tight end who is always really reliable, who will definitely give you 8 to 15 points every week. I think that's a solid pick. Courtland Sutton and Austin Eckler are chosen next. Courtland Sutton, I believe, is solid, and if Bo Nix can find him the ball, it's a great trade asset or a great flex option moving forward. And then we have Austin Eckler, who, as we saw last year, fall off a cliff. No, literally, like we might have seen him play with broken legs last year. He looked older, he looked a lot slower, and was just not the same player he once was in 2022. I don't see a lot of upside with Eckler here, and a waste of a draft pick. Jameson Williams and Jerry Jeudy are picked next, and again, I actually kind of like these 2 picks. Jameson Williams is a clear wide receiver 2 for an offense that's very explosive, but last year just couldn't find his touch. I do think that Jared Goff will be able to find him a little bit more, and if he explodes, is a great steal here. And Jerry Jeudy is another wide receiver who has not performed as expected, but I believe in a new offense, Judy's looking to reinvent himself as the elite wide receiver we all once thought he would be. Some bye weeks that are of concern for Nick are week 10, where he will be without his wide receiver 2, and Davante Adams, and his running back 2, and Kenneth Walker. Based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving Nick a solid B-. I believe that his wide receiver core is fantastic, and his running back options are solid as well, but I believe his running back depth is of some concern. ESPN has Nick ranked 6th in the league, and I actually agree with ESPN as he is ranked number 6 on the week 1 power ranking. And with the 5th overall pick, we have Mr. Reed up next. His first 2 picks in the draft would be Breece Hall and Puka Nacua. With the 5th pick, you could have gone with a lot of different directions here. And in my opinion, I think he absolutely made the right choice. With Breece Hall coming off an ACL injury last year and having limited snaps to start the season, he still ended up at running back 2, as he absolutely shattered expectations. I think this pick is a slam dunk and believe Breece Hall will absolutely carry this team. Puka Nacua is also another player who absolutely shattered expectations last year, as he went undrafted in most leagues. I think this is a great pick as long as he is able to continue the production as he did last year, as there is a little bit of concern with Cooper Kupp playing a full year, but even when Cooper Kupp came back, his drop in targets never really came to be, as I believe Puka is one of Stafford's favorite receivers. Reed's next 2 picks were then Nico Collins and Deebo Samuel. I think these 2 picks are fine. Nico concerns me a little bit with how stacked his new offense is, and the fact that he was a little inconsistent just by himself last year, but overall I think he and Diggs are going to be fighting for a wide receiver 1 spot and will be getting plenty of targets. Devo is also someone that I can never predict on how well he's going to play. If he finds himself on a team without IU, then I believe he is absolutely going to skyrocket. And also the fact that the 49ers use him in so many different creative ways leads me to believe that he is going to be just fine. His next two picks are Aaron Jones and Trey McBride. And with Aaron Jones, I really don't know how to feel. I do think that he is going to be very important to his new offense and will be relied on for a lot of checkdowns and dump-offs. But his lack of production last year makes him some concern, even with the team that had a great O-line and a quarterback who is more than capable of getting him the ball. Again though, with the lack of running backs that were underneath him and on a roster where he hadn't had an RB2 yet, I think that this is a solid pick. I also believe that Trey McBride was a great pick on his part. I believe that McBride is going to be one of the best tight ends going into next year, especially with Kyler Murray being back under center, and to snag him at round 6, I think is a huge steal. His next pick is one of my favorites and was actually voted around the league as one of the best steals in the draft. That pick would be Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice in the first half of last year went a little unnoticed, as he was drafted in an offense where anyone could have been wide receiver 1. And with a quarterback who is widely considered as the greatest of all time, I think he only has extreme upside and could fight for wide receiver 2 on Reed's team. His next two picks would then be Kyler Murray and Tony Pollard. Kyler Murray, with the playing style he possesses, to be picked this late in the draft is, in my opinion, another steal. If he stays 100% healthy throughout the year and stays off Xbox, I believe he becomes a top 10 quarterback to finish the year. Tony Pollard, however, is another player I probably would have avoided going into this year. He is more than likely going to be splitting snaps with Tyjae Spears, so there is obviously some concern. His next couple of picks I'll talk about will be Jerome Ford and TJ Hockenson. Ford this late, I think, is another sleeper pick, where if Chubb can't return to his normal healthy self, we all saw last year what Ford could do just by himself. It will be right there to pick up where he left off last season. But TJ Hockenson being picked in the 13th round, in my opinion, was another huge steal. However, he is going to be hurt to start the season, but when he comes back, him and Trey McBride I think will be huge trade assets moving forward. A key bye week for Reed will be week 6, where he is without Aaron Jones and Puka Nacua. And based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving Reed a solid B+. I think overall he's got a very solid team, some sneaky upside to everyone involved. ESPN ranks Reed's team in 9th, however on my ranking he will be 4th on my week 1 power ranking. The 4th overall pick, we have Devon up next. Devon's first two picks in the draft would go on to be Bijan Robinson and Derrick Henry. He basically played with the same strategy as Gavin, where he would go running backs first and wide receivers later. Kind of. Bijan Robinson at the 4th was a tough spot to be in, because you could very well easily go with Bijan or Breece Hall, but I believe that Bijan Robinson just took the edge a little bit. Bijan Robinson, with a new head coach and an offensive coordinator who has gone on to say that they're going to utilize Bijan Robinson the same way that CMC is used in the 49ers offense, is obviously extremely exciting. Derrick Henry is someone who concerns me a little bit, where he clearly regressed last year with the Titans on a contract year, and he did have some risk of injury. So in the 2nd round, you might want to reconsider, but also with the other running backs that were still left on the board, I think that this is another solid pick. This next pick was voted by an owner as one of the bigger steals in the draft. You might know who it is. To be one of the biggest steals in the draft, as that pick would then be Chris Olave. I do believe that some of the wide receivers selected above Chris Olave were pretty questionable, and I think that Olave is in fact a great pick to be wide receiver 1. However, I will say that he is not the strongest wide receiver 1 compared to most other teams. His next two picks would end up being Josh Allen and Devontae Smith. Josh Allen was the first quarterback to be selected. Josh Allen was the first quarterback to be selected in this year's draft. As he has shown in the past, he is more than capable of being quarterback 1 every year. However, his only downside is that he lost his wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, and it is now currently a toss-up to who is going to fill that role, making this more of a risk. And in my opinion, I think that Lamar or Hurts could have very well easily been drafted earlier. Devontae Smith is another player I'm a little hesitant on. However. He is obviously a freak athlete who can challenge any and all corners in the league, but unfortunately he shares the same field with someone who, if not given the opportunity to score every drive, is going to cry, poop, and pee his pants. He is still a great receiver, but there will be challenges. I think honestly you maybe could have gone elsewhere with this pick. His next two picks would then end up being Dalton Kincaid and Keenan Allen. Dalton Kincaid in an offense with a wide receiver 1 is questionable, I believe is a fantastic pick. Keenan Allen, in my opinion, is a huge toss-up here. I think at this point of the draft, it was acceptable to take Keenan Allen, and I think that falling in the flex is great, but obviously he's getting a little bit older on an offense that is going to be very fast, and with a rookie quarterback, we never know how his production might go. However, he is going to be very clearly wide receiver 2, and I think he's going to be fed the ball way more than anyone thinks. The next two picks would end up being Javonte Williams and Ladd McConkey. Javonte Williams is widely regarded to be a bust this year, but I will respectfully disagree. Coming off an ACL injury, he had a bit of a slow start in his first 6 weeks, given that his highest point game was 9.7 7 points. However, down the stretch of the year, he's shown that he is more than capable of producing very well within an offense. He is definitely going to be relied on as a rookie quarterback. And Lad McConkey, just quite simply, has a fantastic and amazing football name. Therefore, he is quite obviously the biggest steal in the draft, and I don't really need to talk about this any further. Here's a picture of Lad. Look how cool that guy is. A key bye week for Devon will be week 12, where he is without his quarterback in Josh Allen, his wide receiver 1 in Olave, and his running back 1 in Bijan Robinson. Based on this draft, I'm going to give Devon an A-. I believe that his running back core is one of the best. I believe that his running back core is one of the best, if not the best in the entire league, while still having solid options at his receivers. Some concern, however, with his bench, with only having one true running back option, so he'll need to try and trade for some solid bench pieces moving forward. ESPN ranks Devon in first, however, he will be placed 3rd overall in my week 1 power ranking. With the 3rd overall pick in the league draft, Howitt is up next. Howitt with his first 2 picks were Tyreek Hill and Isaiah Pacheco. I think after CeeDee Lamb was taken at the 2nd spot, you should have snagged a running back, but Tyreek Hill is just as good no matter what. There is one tiny concern with Tyreek Hill, as he did digress a little bit last year. He was getting hurt more frequently than he had his whole career, but as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be an absolute freak. Isaiah Pacheco is someone that I do like, however, it is just kind of difficult to trust a Kansas City wide receiver, given the fact that they have a Hall of Fame quarterback who will absolutely throw the ball as often as he possibly can. But with that, he does see his fair share of targets, which is obviously his one true upside. And again, his rushing game is good, it's just very inconsistent. His next couple of picks would then be James Cook and Travis Kelce. With James Cook, the Kansas City theme team is now dead, and I think overall it's just not the greatest pick here. I don't know why ESPN and all these other leagues think James Cook is that great. I do understand that that Josh Allen's receiver core is not the best and that James Cook probably will be relied on a lot this year, but even then, we all saw last year, James Cook only had 2 touchdowns total in a season where he played every single game. I do not trust the James Cook hype, and I don't think that as a running back too, he is solid. Travis Kelce had to go at some point in the draft, and honestly, I think that in the 4th round is really genuinely not that bad. He's obviously one of the league's best tight ends we've ever seen, but obviously age is getting to him and Taylor Swift is distracting him just a tiny little bit. However, it is still Travis Kelce and is Mahomes' trusted #1 receiver, so he's going to be fine. And honestly, I think that as a 4th round pick, this is an absolute steal. Howitt's next pick would then be Stefon Diggs. Honestly, I think it's fine. New offense with a rookie quarterback who is going to trust Stefon Diggs going down the line. This next pick Howitt would make would then be considered to be one of the bigger steals in the draft. However, we know who voted for it, we know who you are, and it is just simply not true. And if it weren't for another famous pick in this draft, this would be considered one of the biggest reaches in the entire draft, okay? Jonathan Brooks was then selected next. Jonathan Brooks in the 6th round was a little mind-boggling. And although I do think he's a great player, I just don't think in that spot in the draft he is anyone that you should even think about. And even then, he is young, so the Panthers will probably even put him on a limited snap count, which even destroys his production more. I would assume that by the time he even comes back and makes a full return to the league, your season might already be over. And if your team can carry him around with him on the IR for the first 4 to 6 weeks, then obviously you might be fine and this could be considered a steal. However, in the meantime and in hindsight, this is a very bad pick. His next 2 picks would then be Amari Cooper and Joe Burrow. I think Amari Cooper is fine here. I think that he is a great flex option as a wide receiver 1 in Cleveland with a quarterback who, you know, he's obviously trying to make a comeback in this league. And Amari Cooper is one of his favorite receivers. He's going to be fed, and again, I think this is a solid pick. And Joe Burrow this late, I think is also another great pick. As long as he stays healthy, he's a great fantasy quarterback. Your next couple of picks would be Brian Robinson and Devon Singletary. I think both these picks are fine, especially this late in the draft. They're both running back 1s. Devon Singletary is just in a bad offense, but he was also able to find his way into an RB1 role with the Texans last year over a running back who had tremendous hype. However, Brian Robinson is going to be maybe splitting time with Austin Eckler, but I do believe that he is way better than Austin Eckler, and I think on the bench, he is completely fine. Key week for Howitt will be week 6, where he is left without his running back 1 in Pacheco, his quarterback in Joe Burrow, tight end with Kelce. Based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving Howitt a C-. I think your wide receiver core is strong enough to be able to carry you, but the lack of depth and star power at running back, in my opinion, is going to hurt you. ESPN ranks your team at number 2 overall. However, you will be placed 8th on my weekly power ranking. With the 2nd overall pick, we have Jake up next. Jake starts his first 2 picks off with CeeDee Lamb and Marvin Harrison Jr. Jake made the absolute right choice at number 2 by taking CeeDee Lamb and see nothing wrong with this pick. It was also just announced that he did just grab a 4-year extension with the Cowboys, meaning that not only is he going to play this year, but he's going to be absolutely dominant. This is a great pick here. Marvin Harrison Jr. was also one of my favorite wide receivers going into this draft, and in my opinion, I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. falling this low in the draft kind of blew my mind. I think as a rookie, he is in one of the best situations possible. He's going to be highly targeted by a quarterback who loves his wide receiver 1. This honestly might be one of the best picks in the entire draft. His next 2 picks would then be Devon and Jalen Hurts. Devon, as we once saw last year, has the chance to be one of the best running backs in this entire league. But obviously, he just has to stay healthy. And the fact that Raheem Mostert is still on the roster, they could very well split snaps just a tiny bit, but we'll have to see how that works out week 1. But for now, I think Devon is a splash in the 3rd round. And Jalen Hurts is one of my favorite quarterbacks going into this year. I don't know why he wasn't the first quarterback chosen here, mostly for the fact that if he can keep using his leg, he keeps getting that brotherly shove in the end zone, he's going to be QB1 for sure. And I think these 2 picks are great. His next 2 picks would then be Jalen Waddle and DeAndre Swift. I also believe that Jalen Waddle is a fantastic flex option to have. Although he is paired up with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle is a receiver where if he went to go play for another team, he would very easily be wide receiver 1. He's that good. And in my opinion, I think that DeAndre Swift in the 6th, in that spot was perfect. I think DeAndre Swift is going to be very underrated this year. I think that this is another slam dunk pick. His next 2 picks would then be David Montgomery and Jaden Reed. David Montgomery is a very confusing player to have. One game he's got 7 touchdowns and one game he's got 2 carries. How he will be used this year is a big question, especially with the breakout of Jahmyr Gibbs. I do believe that David Montgomery is someone who will more than likely be traded down the line, but is obviously a huge trade asset, especially if Jahmyr Gibbs ends up falling. Jaden Reed is also another player who is kind of used like Deebo Samuel, and the Packers use him very creatively. I think we'll need to see a little bit more consistency out of him, and just in general more playing time, but in the meantime, I think that Jaden Reed is a solid pick. His next pick would then be George Kittle. George Kittle is a tight end that absolutely pisses me off so unbelievably bad, just for the fact that in one game he'll put up 28 points and then the next game immediately after he'll have 1 catch for 15 yards. Obviously as a team player, George Kittle is a great tight end to have for a team, but because he's so versatile in his blocking and his receiving game, you just absolutely never know what he's actually going to do. But again, is another solid tight end to have. His next 2 picks are widely considered among the league as one of the bigger steals in the draft, and I would absolutely have to agree, with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Zach Moss and Chase Brown are both playing for the Cincinnati Bengals this year, where Zach Moss just broke out with the Colts last year as Jonathan Taylor went down. In that 4-game stretch, he absolutely tore it up. And so now with the chance to play on a team where their RB1 has gone and left, I think this is a solid pick. Chase Brown is also playing in his 2nd year, where he was taking rush attempts away from Joe Mixon. I think having them both on your bench is going to be huge, and in my opinion, think that these are genuinely the best steals in the entire draft. Key week for Jake would be week 7, where he is left without his wide receiver 1 in Tyreek Hill and his running back 2 in DeAndre Swift. Based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving Jake a solid A. Looking at his team, his receivers are absolutely stacked, and somehow, even with picking 2 receivers first, he was still able to land a solid running back 1. He's also got amazing bench pieces that he can either stash until needed or trade for bigger assets. ESPN has Jake's team ranked 7th overall, and 2 owners around the league voted Jake to have the best team. However, in my ranking, he will be ranked number 2 on my week 1 power rankings. And finally, with the first overall pick in this year's Fantasy League draft, we have none other than Blake and Joey. His first pick is a great one, a smart one, a good one, a respectable one even. Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you really can't go wrong there, right? I mean, he's a freak athlete. The guy might even be able to fly. I don't know. He just hasn't shown us yet that he's more than able to. I would say the only concern maybe is the Madden curse. I don't know. Apparently that's a thing. But either way, he was absolutely okay here in the first spot. It's where everyone took him at. His next 2 picks, however, would then surprise a lot of people in both draft rooms, actually. Mike Evans and Michael Pittman. I think they're both solid receivers, right? Don't get me wrong. Mike Evans, he's gone however many years in a row with 1,000 yards receiving. There was obviously concern last year that with Baker Mayfield, you know, there was going to be some issues there. But clearly they weren't. He was still the same 1,000-yard receiver that we've seen plenty of times before. He's targeted quite well. I just believe that there were other receivers still left that were decent. And then Michael Pittman. But again, I just think that those 2 picks were just some reaches. And I think if you wanted to, you could have stacked the running back position. I think that you very well could have gone with some other receivers listed over here. Even if you miss out on them and they don't come back to you in the 4th and 5th, you would then see Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts get selected. So in the 4th, you inevitably take Patrick Mahomes, who again, Patrick Mahomes is good. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. But even with carrying that name, he was still ranked QB8. I think fantasy-wise, he shouldn't have gone 3rd overall for quarterback selected. I think, again, you could have just waited and waited for the turnaround. Or you could have taken Lamar Jackson here, and I would have loved it. I think that any quarterback that uses his legs and is productive with his legs should always fall first. Not saying Patrick Mahomes is not, but there's just more upside there. And again, I don't think you needed to take Patrick Mahomes in this spot. And then we get to your next pick, which the whole league has voted to be the absolute biggest reach in the entire draft. Drum roll, please. Just kidding. Don't want one. You picked Zamir White. Zamir White in the 5th round. The beginning of the 5th round. Like, this isn't like a mid-round, late 5th round pick. This is basically a 4th round pick. Here are the other running backs you could have chosen here at this spot. He's fine. Zamir White is decent, right? I think he's fine. But this early, we didn't know why. Just absolutely dumbfounded. And especially given the current state of your roster at that point, we were just simply confused. Again, he's going to be a running back 1 for the Raiders. Could have gotten a tight end, because then you would see in the 5th round, Kincaid and Trey McBride would go. You see these tight end, I don't think picking a tight end at that spot would have been a reach. I think that would have been just okay, considering the fact that you have to wait for another 19 picks. Speaking of those 19 picks, I also believe that Zamir White falls back to you when you jump back in. Up to this point, this is probably the worst 5 picks from a team I've ever seen. You would then take Kyle Pitts and James Conner. I love Kyle Pitts, I'm not gonna lie. He's actually one of my favorite tight ends this year, and I'm really excited to see what he does. Again, I think that the whole Falcons offense is going to be so good, and I think that Kyle Pitts is also going to be another player that they try and change their career around. Because if not, he might never get drafted again. I hope he plays well for you, Blake. Again, really, I hope he plays well. And then James Conner. James Conner, in my opinion, is better than Zamir White. Again, if James Conner fell that far late, Zamir White also comes back to you. But again, James Conner is fine. Running back 1, new offense, good offense. I think he's gonna play a good role there. I think that's a fine pick for you. Then you would take JSN and DeAndre Hopkins. I actually love the JSN pick. I think that he's super underrated. I think that he's flying under everybody's radar. And I think that genuinely this is a solid pick this late in the draft. I again, really like this pick here. And DeAndre Hopkins, not the biggest fan of him. You're gonna try and trade him every single week like you did last year. More than likely not gonna happen. He's probably just gonna ride on your bench for a long time. And then everything else after that, we don't really need to talk about, nothing too exciting. A key week for Blake and Joey is week 11, where they are without Mike Evans and running back 2 and James Conner. But other than that, your bye weeks look okay. Based on what I've seen in this draft, I'm giving you a solid F-. Unfortunately, this team just is really bad. Your starting wide receiver core is mid, and your running backs, besides CMC of course, are pretty mid as well. Your bench, in my opinion, has very little upside to it, where you do have good trade pieces or stash pieces in JSN and Hopkins, but they will absolutely have to perform in order for anyone to even remotely think about trading for them. I think the only way for you to be in the playoff hunt is if you somehow absolutely rebuild this entire squad, which probably means you end up giving McCaffrey away. Unfortunately, this team has no hope. ESPN has you ranked at number 5. According to a group poll, the league has unanimously voted you as having the worst team in the entire draft. And I would have to agree, placing you at number 10 on my week 1 power ranking.